Recording in progress.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone, to the second meeting of the Rehoboth Beach and City of Lewes Police Accountability Committee. If we could first have our call to order, ask anyone to make sure that if you have your cell phones, please make sure that they're silenced during the course of the meeting. And if we could just do a brief roll call as to who's present. My name's Dan Zackham from Lewes.
Very good.
Kim Lacey.
Chief Banks, Rehoboth Beach.
Mark Sweet, Rehoboth Beach.
Tom Spell, Lewes.
Jamie Locklear, Lewes.
Dan D. Simone.
Eddie Husino.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Dan.
Oh, sorry. Andrew, can you hear us?
Sorry, I was muted.
Good morning. Glad to have
Good
you.
morning.
Our first order of business, if we could just briefly signal our approval or not of today's agenda by a show of hands. Yes? No? Consider the agenda approved. Secondly, approval of our minutes of our June meeting. Again, by hands, a signal. Yes? Minutes are approved. Our new business today, we're very fortunate to have two folks to come and educate us a little bit today. I know it's education that I certainly need. And first, and again, in terms of each of you gentlemen, your respective schedules, Sean is listed first, if that's okay. If it works with your schedule?
Thank you, sir.
Sean, we have Sean Moriarty, the Executive Director of the State of Delaware Police Officer and Standards and Training Commission, and is going to help us to better understand our duties and responsibilities as members of this committee as we go forward. So, Mr. Moriarty, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Distinct honor and certainly a pleasure to be here with all of you. So, as it was just kind of announced, rather than do a PowerPoint, I have a PowerPoint, but rather than do that, I thought it'd be best, and you can, I'm going to be looking this way, but you can look behind me, obviously, at the screen. That's our website. So I thought that rather I'd do this presentation, that if something that I missed or something that you want to go back to later on, you have the ability to go right to that website. It's full and open to the public, so you can see everything in there that I talk about here today and give you an overview. My job here today is to provide you an overview of kind of what is POST, what is the Police Officer Standards and Training Commission, and the second part of my house, which is the Delaware Police Accreditation Commission, so post-DPAC with our abbreviations and acronyms. And from there, just provide you with an overview, and then part of that will also be talking about what it is for the police accountability, what is your role with that, how does that fall into the larger environment, not only of these two communities, but the profession, right? So what are we doing for law enforcement in Delaware and throughout? So I'm going to walk you through a PowerPoint. If at any point in time I go too fast or something that I say that you don't understand, by all means stop me. I'd like to do it as an interactive. And if there's somebody online too, if you're able to see that, whoever, I think there was one gentleman, maybe, stop me. I'm here to answer any questions. I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because I want to be. And I appreciate all of you stepping up, not only to join the Police Accountability Committee as an extra item, right? I know that time is an incredible commodity, and you're providing that here as an incredible service to your communities and the larger law enforcement world that we have here in Delaware and beyond. So thank you for doing that. And it's a very important role, right? So we talk about police reform and where we're going with that and so forth. And so a little bit of history in Delaware, and I'll preface it first. So I've been in law enforcement a long time too, and so I started out as a municipal police officer in Massachusetts, where I was born and raised, and I've been down here 32 years now. I retired from the state police 22 months ago from the executive staff as the administrative major. So, and then what happened is, in our state, for this particularly, we had, the predecessor of POST was abbreviated, it was called the Council on Police Training. So we had that for years. The administrator over the council was the director of training for the state police, and also that with the rank of captain. So years ago I had that position, and then later I oversaw that position as well. So I have a lot of experience kind of in this field. And so what happened is, in the interest of greater police reform, started about 2020 and so forth, and then later on our state had a lot of committees that were looking at what can we do to do better for policing, for accountability, transparency, professionalization, et cetera. And I had the fortune of representing the state police as one member of the Commission on the Workforce Development, which kind of led to a lot of where we are here today and working in conjunction with our legislators and so forth. So in 2023, 2 bills were passed. HB 205 and HB 206. 205 dealt with the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights and procedures regarding internal affairs investigations and administrative proceedings and so forth, among other things. And then HB 206 is the predominant law that governs where I am now with post-DPAC and how the PACs fall underneath that as well. So what it did is it effectively abolished the Council on Police Training, and particularly in the administration of the state police, and then moved it over as an independent, brand-new division under Safety and Homeland Security. So I work for Secretary Bushweller, who works obviously for the governor, so one of the cabinet secretaries for that. If you think about safety and Homeland Security in our state, State Police's division, Capitol Police, Division of Forensic Science, Delaware Alcohol and Tobacco Enforcement, and then 2 brand-new commissions were formed. One was the Office of the Marijuana Commission, which I have nothing to do with other than they're my neighbors, and we work together, we're in the same building, and then post-DPAC. So DPAC was an existent, that's the accreditation side of the house, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth a lot on here, but that existed as a voluntary compliance in our state for police agencies who are not already nationally accredited for the Commission for Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, or CALEA. They decided to say, what can we do to standardize policies and procedures and how we do things in agencies? So voluntary. That got absorbed under when the creation of post-DPAC, so that is now under my auspices and the team. So I have a team of 5 statewide to work on both of these endeavors as we go through this presentation. Any questions so far? Okay, great. So if you could please, so this website, if you're able to scroll down a little bit, you'll see there's more things there too. But I designed the website, for the first 8 months, it was just me. And now we've grown to a team of 5. And Delaware Technology Information Center, there's 2 fantastic people that help design state websites. So I give credit to them every time because I couldn't have put this together without them. And that's Terry Less and Tony Marge, they're great people. But this is a forward-facing website for all. If you Google, if you say, okay, what do I need to find that? Simply Google Delaware Post. Not Post Office, just Delaware Post. It'll come right up. And if you kind of scroll back down, you'll see different things, and a little bit more, right there. So we have 4 meetings for post, that are quarterly big meetings, aside from special meetings, but regular scheduled meetings, and then 4 on the accreditation. Today happens to be one of the accreditation big meetings. So when I leave here, I'll be heading back up to Dover. I live down here, but I'll be heading back up to Dover for that meeting, and then where our office is to officiate that. We have some agencies that are going forward, among other things, for their first accreditation, so more to come. The second thing that we post is our actual post meetings, which the next one is November 18th. It's at 2 o'clock in Dover at our building, which is 1128 South Bradford Street. It's all on the website. You don't have to take notes. I say that to you because this is always forward-facing what those dates are. The chiefs know when they are. The commission members know where they are. I'll go through that in a second. But for all of you, you are more than welcome. I'd love to have you attend these meetings, and we do a virtual link too, so if you're not able to travel to Dover or it's more convenient, just stay at home, whatever, you're more than welcome. We would love to have your input. It's not just reserved for Rehoboth and Lewes, is my point. It's that your input is sought, and I would love to have it, including anything you see or that I say here today or you see here today. Okay? All right, so clearly right up there, if you can kind of scroll down, if you look at the top tabs, I'm sorry, but even on there, you'll see that we go through different things with that. On the About tab, on the top left, if you could, please. Okay, there's a message from me. If you click on Core Values, please, real quick. You'll see our core values, if you scroll down, of what we believe in and what we embody and we hope to accomplish with those. And then subsequent to that, if you get to the missions, duties, and responsibilities, so it's still under the above. down in the About tab. Yes, please. And go down there. And if you go to our mission, I think this is really important you think about this, right? So we're here to enhance public trust and confidence in law enforcement. I talked to you about accountability, transparency, professionalization. It's exactly what we're working to do, which is why you play a pivotal role in providing us with extra knowledge that we can build upon on what we're trying to do as well. Post-commission members, please. You could go right to the left, too, if you wanted to. It's easier. Yep. To the left, please. There you go. Thank you so much. So there's 16 members. Well, we just added 17th, but we had 16 members, and now it's 17 members of the Post Commission. A lot of those are specifically enunciated or listed in the code of what those members may be, and then some have a proxy that goes with that. But what the law also did was it changed how our initial member to increase more citizen involvement, non-law enforcement members as part of this committee. So you'll see like that, for example. Now as it's scrolling, and thank you for doing that, you'll see 3 members that are there, and there's others too. So Senator Siegfried just joined as well, so that's great there. We also have Representative Cook, so there's members from the General Assembly that are also there, and there's others, the League of Governments, and you see the chiefs and so forth. Mayor Reddington from Ocean View just joined. He's replacing Mayor Chandler from Dagsboro on the commission, so we're excited to have him at his first meeting coming up. But it's a very diverse group. Okay, if we could go back to the left, perfect, yes. That's another repeat of what I have on the front page. So we are on the public meeting calendar, just like you did locally to comply with FOIA and public meetings. We do the same for state agencies, so they're there as well. And you can sign up for any state meeting to see that and know what those are if you're interested in that. Okay, thank you. There is a section about FOIA that's there, some news that's there. We need to update that. But reports and publications, if you could go to that. This is the first annual report that we put together. If it comes up, it's there. Again, everything I'm showing you there is for public, and if you kind of click on that, please, and keep going through, you'll see the different tables of contents. It goes through different things that I'm talking about. The commission members there, person you maybe don't see again on that page, and then you'll see different things that we go through as I walk through what those are, from certifications to training standards to reactivations, reciprocities, conduct, and potentially decertifications. That being said, let's really get to the nuts and bolts of what this is. What does POST do? Well, in essence, we set the hiring criteria for any police officer in our state. Whether that be a brand new police officer that's just coming in and say, I want to be a police officer, what that is, or anybody coming from outside of Delaware into our state, and we set, and they say, okay, I've been a police officer somewhere else, and now I want to move to Delaware and be a police officer, and we have a lot of that. So we set what those standards are. We set the minimum criteria, so if we could go back to the website, yes, thank you, and go to certification and go to initial requirements, perfect, thank you very much, and scroll down. Working on this is a work in progress. I used to say that I was painting the airplane in flight. Now I have several airplanes that are taking off, and we're trying to paint multiple ones as we go forward with this. The current regulations right now I'm going to go through with you. I will let you know that I'm getting ready to send to our post commissioners a complete redlined revisions, proposed revisions for all of these to bring those up as part of what we're trying to do for, again, the whole spirit of greater professionalization and modernization from where we've been to where we need to be. But if you kind of look at here, you'll see things such as citizen of the United States, has to be 21 years old for a full-time employment, licensed medical doctor, all right? We have now allowed a nurse practitioner or a PA to be able to conduct that, but a full medical, and you would expect that. A police officer to be able to rescue somebody from a burning vehicle, from a crushed car, from a pursuit, or somebody's beating up on somebody, and how can you save somebody from those circumstances? So we want them to be physically fit in order to perform those bona fide occupational qualifiers, or those necessary requirements of being a police officer. The same thing with everything from eyes. So 2200 correctable to 2020 in both eyes, normal depth, normal color vision, licensed optometrist or ophthalmologist to do that review, licensed psychologist has to do a full psychological. We want people to sound body and mind to be able to have that whole relationship. We want police officers who obviously are treating people respectfully and they're not having any kind of mental disorder, whether it be temporary or full-time. So we work through all of those different things. As you'll see there too, from drug screening tests, we obviously test for that. We do, they require comprehensive background investigations. Post doesn't require, but many agencies do polygraphs, for example. As a polygraph person, examiner, I'm partial to that as well, but definitely background. Some do voice stress analyzers and other augmentations to try to elicit truth. We have a validated the psych test I talked to you about, a competency-based examination coming in, and a physical fitness evaluation as well to come through. Right now, the current requirement is only a high school diploma or GED for formal education. Valid driver's license. Certainly, we look at history of what that person's driving record is. If you're putting a police officer or somebody behind a 4,000-pound vehicle at potentially high speeds, you want somebody that can be trained and is not, certainly capable of not having a lot of violations, let's just say. Okay? We talk about prohibitors such as felonies or misdemeanors or domestic violence, things that would prohibit somebody from not only possessing a firearm, but also that would allow them to have a good conduct if, again, you're entrusting them to enforce the laws and our liberties and freedoms. Okay, so that's pretty much what we do. So we set the hiring criteria for what those are. The second big thing, if you could go up to the certification again, please, it should be the drop down. I'm sorry, let's just stick with reactivation. Perfect, thank you. Reactivation, so when somebody goes through and we set the criteria and they're hired, well, what happens if somebody's a police officer and all of a sudden they may be changed to another department? We have a lot of that too. Particularly in the last few years with policing recruitment being the #1 issue facing law enforcement agencies, as noted by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. There's a huge decline in people applying to be police officers, and also a huge exodus of seasoned officers for one reason or another. Some of it's age requirements. For example, for me and Delaware State Police, we have a mandatory age 55 requirement, so there is no choice at those kind of things for there. But reactivation, somebody leaves a department and they want to come back to being another department, or they've just said, okay, I want to take a break and I want to come back. We set the criteria for what they have to do too. Is there a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. So for reactivation, if somebody leaves, if they've been gone for 5 years or more from their agency, they have to repeat the entire police academy. If it's less than that, we set certain parameters of what they need to do as far as training requirements and certification. So, for example, firearms, re-indoctrination to that, and certification, AED, CPR, law enforcement medical response, those kind of modalities that fall into what their training requires for them to be reactivated. All the chiefs have a requirement. Anytime there's a change of employment, they have 5 days to send post a form noting that an officer is leaving. Either they're retiring, they're resigning, or they were terminated. And they indicate that on the form and the reasons for that. That triggers a review by us to see where is this person, are they leaving in good standing, or are they not? If they are, then we put that into a system and they go into an inactive status. If they come back or they want to come back, the incoming chief says, I would like to hire this officer. They provide another form requesting us to review them to be reactivated. We look at all those requirements. We send those chiefs those requirements. And then they assure that those officer does that, sends the appropriate documentation. We give the approval for them to be reactivated, and we put that for the full commission for them to be reactivated at the new department. Or sometimes the department that they were in initially, and they took a pause, and they came back. So again, speaking from my personal, we had a trooper who left us, didn't retire, but left, went to I believe, a family member, but he moved to Honolulu Police Department, Hawaii, and surprisingly enough, he didn't like it as much as here, so he came back. So he came back. So he's an active duty trooper now, and it was all great. So for reactivation, review all those things. The chiefs cannot start an officer on that new employment until we give the approval for that. The last thing is, to the left is of that where we were going, is reciprocity. Very similar if an officer is applying from outside, as I started in my opening here, coming from another department. So we have a lot, particularly from our contiguous states, so think of Maryland, Pennsylvania, that are coming in, New Jersey, one just came from Rhode Island. So they're coming down, and what we look for there is, we do literally a comparison from hours to hours for their training, from topic for subject matter to hours to the instruction, side by side with our Delaware standards to make sure that they are in compliance, while also looking at that 5-year rule and where they are in that separation that I talked to you about a second ago. And then so the chiefs would also request them. I have this officer from, let's say, Maryland, that we'd like to hire that officer. What do we need to do? Same process. We review it, we provide them with the criteria, and so forth, and they move forward. Interesting enough, members of federal government, like the FBI, they are not able to go into a policing job without going through an entire police academy. They go through stellar academies, but they're a little bit different than the set curriculum that follows for police officers in our state, as it currently is written. Questions so far about that? Okay. If we can go back over. So what happens, let me start here too. There's a misnomer for many in the state, and particularly prior to where we started moving with this over the last 22 months or so, that the chiefs of the town or the state or whomever of the agencies that are employing these officers, that they own the certification of that police officer, and that's not true. The license to be a police officer is held by post. So it's a state certification that we issue upon the requirements I just talked to you about, and then the training, which I'll get to in a second, that they have to complete initially and then reoccurring, and then their behaviors that carries with them. So what are they doing that affects the accountability piece? Most disciplinary issues, if somebody violates a policy or procedure, that's handled by the chiefs at those departments. But if the conduct is egregious enough or goes into the criminal realm, such as close by what happened in Bethany Beach, unfortunately with the chief and the deputy chief who were investigated by the FBI, indicted by the FBI, convicted and now are serving prison sentences and also repaying money back as form of restitution for essentially theft of money, federal money for jobs that were not worked. So what happens is something like that. That falls over to us. If it affects if they're terminated from the police departments, that goes to us. We look at that, look at the criteria, and then what I'll do is I'll schedule what's called a decertification hearing. So just as much as we issue the license, think of it like a DMV or a motor vehicle for getting a driver's license, we issue the license just like any other professional body, medical license, what have you. And if they violate that, there's a hearing, there's a process that goes through. They have the right to do that. We have a 3-person hearing board. In addition to a deputy attorney general, it's assigned to post as a secondary job, and then does a fabulous job. And then we have a hearing. Just had one last week, and we had an officer, attorneys for the town, attorneys for the officer, the outgoing officer that was accused, certainly deputy attorney general, working through that case, procedural presentation. At the end, the hearing board recommended decertification for this officer. That now goes before the full commission at our next regularly scheduled meeting. So if you're interested in seeing that and go forward, that's an opportunity for you to see that at our next month's meeting for post. So if the board approves that, then they are decertified. On the other hand, if we send the paperwork off to the officer and say, your conduct, you've been dismissed or terminated from the police department, your conduct could be grounds for decertification, do you wish to have a hearing or not? If they say no, and they allow their license to just be surrendered or they don't contest it, then we do an administrative decertification before the commission, and they also vote on that. Either result of that, we put them on what's called the National Decertification Index, or the NDI, which is a national registry of all decertified police officers. So it's across the country. There is a federal agency decertification. It is currently not merged with NDI, but there's a work in progress for that. So what is the importance of that? I'll give you a real-life example. We had an officer who was decertified in Delaware. 2 months later, I got a call from Florida. And the deputy sheriff, who was doing a background investigation properly, did an inquiry, saw that this officer was decertified here in Delaware, provided me the appropriate forms, releases, and so forth, and then I was able to share with him even more detail about what that decertification was for, and then he reached back out to that officer's prior department and so forth. The officer was not hired because of that and the circumstances that led to that decertification. So what it is designed to do is to prevent a bad officer, for all intents and purposes, from going from one agency to another or even to other states. So again, the purpose is in the interest of greater public safety and reform, and there's obviously those processes that go along with that for hearings and judicial process along the way for those rights. So there's a huge value in that. So all the post directors across the country, we just had a retreat at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and there was 36 of us, and these are things that we talk about to work for better law enforcement at our level of how we can do better as states working together, and the NDI is a huge asset with that. Any questions so far about that? Yes, ma'am.
So my question, two quick questions. One is, do you track and publish data regarding the types of infractions and the disposition of those infractions? And then my second question is, assuming you do that, how do we compare as a state relative to other similar states?
Great questions, thank you. So if you could go to the decertification tab on the left, that talks about what the decertification is, and if you click on decertification hearing summaries and scroll down, please, here is a list of all of the decertifications we've had since the enactment of the law. If you click on just the top one, just hit deliver, please, you'll see the full report that comes in. It's written very much, it's a legal brief. Sir, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it follows that. And there's a summary of all those things that goes through with that. If you keep going, if it lets you, it'll tell the whole summary, description, evidence, so forth. These are all public, forward-facing summaries for there. If there was no hearing, if you can kind of go back, see if I can think of one. Let's try, you can click on Garen Caffel. For Bethany, so they did not contest these are the two Bethany officers, their certification. So there's an administrative summary of what they did, and in this particular case, there's the publication of, it's across the media of what they've done anyway, so those are there. As far as we compare with others, that's a very hard question because every agency is a little bit different. There are no specific statistics that are compared. So, but I'll just give you an example. We have 4 police academies in Delaware. We have roughly 2,600 police officers. The state of Texas has 141 police academies with exponentially more officers. Percentage-wise of who would be decertified versus not, I don't have that data. It's an interesting question. I don't know if anybody really has that. I will tell you that we have seen, anecdotally, we have seen an increase in decertifications since the enactment of post. So for whatever reason that may be. And it could be a litany. I'd hate to kind of, think about what that could be, but there could be a wide variety of reasons why that is, from greater accountability to, the lack of attentiveness to people's behaviors. I don't know. It could be a lot of different things, or it's just a new society norms. So it could be a variety of things, but I'm sorry I can't get a little bit more specific with you on it. But these are all there for that. We certainly take it seriously. The chiefs do a great job of being very attentive to that. And we're a small state, so sometimes if we hear something a little bit we work together to be able to help that other chief to say, remember those forms, or for questions, and we like to have more of a not adversarial, more of a collegial environment where we share information. So I'm at the chiefs meetings, the local chiefs meetings, the state chiefs meetings, and we talk about these things openly. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any correlations when you do this kind of decertification in terms of their psychological assessment, going back to that to see, we missed something here that the assessment said or something? And the second piece, how often you do psychological assessment in the career of a police officer?
So the first question is that they have to receive a psychological examination for being hired. Okay? If they change employment from the reactivation or reciprocity, that will also trigger in So in other words, they're going, it used to be that there was a gap. If they were going from 1 year, in other words, let's say I retired from Lewes today and I was going to Rehoboth tomorrow, they would not necessarily, by post or COPT requirements, have to have a psychological examination. Most often they did, but that was the chiefs making that decision. It wasn't mandated. We just passed the last post meeting a change, which I'm going to be bringing up again for follow-up at this next post meeting. Part of that discussion is what you just brought up, is that whenever you change employment, that a psychological examination is mandated by post. Even though it's been done by most, if not all agencies, we want to make sure we close that. Reoccurring psychological examinations are left up to the agencies. A lot of that would depend, not by post, unless, well, kind of getting, let me go back. Let's talk about the agencies. Agencies for a psychological event, if they have somebody that's an officer that they feel is not fit for duty, the agencies would follow up with that like they would any other employee, and if they resulted in that, send somebody for a psychological examination, whether it be even something as, we routinely, for example, a critical incident debrief. Somebody's involved, God forbid, but an officer involved shooting, they're involved in a traumatic event, let's say a car accident and involving a child that's seriously injured, things like that really have an acute issue on stress. Those would usually trigger some type of an evaluation, or at least a preliminary evaluation with a psychologist or psychologist or psychologist with those officers in conjunction with the chiefs. But again, it's not a post mandate to function on that. If it was a cumulative stress issue, which we know, and it's interesting, the number 2 issue by the IACP for policing, so officer recruitment and retention. The second is officer wellness and resiliency. See the strong, I think there's more of a causal relationship there, but definitely correlational with those things. We're looking as a profession, much better job than we ever did before, and many in this room can attest, of looking and saying, all right, what are we doing for the officers' mental health? So we're looking at how a treatment of mental health as a practitioner in the field for citizens that they're interacting with and other members, but also that we're looking at mental health and wellness for the officer standpoint. And from the accreditation side of the house, we're saying you need to have better mental health awareness of that. Now, specialized units, I know I'm kind of really going down a rabbit hole, sir, but it's a great question. Specialized units, if they were focused on that, they require extra duty regarding that. So what comes into my mind, for example, is State Police, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. You're looking at images, pornographic images of children, over and over and over again with those kind of cases. They are required to have more of those psychological reviews simply because of the nature of that job. Just like you think about drug investigators, they have more routine checks for an unannounced random drug testing, for example, because they're specialized in focusing on those things. None of those are mandated by post. Those are agency-specific regarding that. But all the agencies are looking at that greater, and on the educational platform, when I talk about the training that we do, or that we oversee with those 4 academies, we're making sure that those come in a little bit more. And I missed your first part of your question, unless I covered it.
I think you did.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sean, a quick
Yes,
question
sir.
for you. And my apologies if I missed this, because I know you covered it a little bit. Can you help us understand a little bit call it the jurisdictional issue between, so if Chief Banks or Chief Spell have an issue that they want to address with an individual officer, at what point do you folks step in and assume responsibility for an investigation and potential sanctions or whatnot?
Great question, sir. Unless it's currently as the law is written, not the regulations, but the law is written, we are only triggered by either the criminal violation that would lead, but predominantly it's whether it goes into a termination, right? Or somebody leaves, an officer is terminated, an officer is under investigation, and they leave while under investigation, so they know they're being investigated for something that could result in a termination, and they decide, well, I'm just going to resign. That would also potentially trigger us to have the authority to go after it and look a little bit more into that certification, so or a voluntary relinquishment. So those are really the only 3 criteria that we have for that. Anything less than that, yes, sir. Anything up to that is all within the purview.
It's a department by department
Yes, sir.
issue.
Correct.
And do they have the discretion if they wanted to call you folks in to assist with an investigation of that nature?
So they don't. They could call for advice in talking things out in a confidential manner. We certainly do that quite a bit. I have one investigator, a part of my 5-person team. We don't have the resources, number one, to do that. Number two, that might be, at least as is written now, overstepping our authority.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the relationship with the Fraternal Order Police as it relates to your work? I would imagine that it could be difficult.
Actually, it's not. We have a very good relationship, if not an excellent relationship, I would characterize, with all of the bargaining units in the state, not only FOP, but Delaware State Troopers Association, Teamsters that represent. In fact, I just had a meeting on Friday with the chief of the chiefs and also the former head of the FOP, Colonel Leonard from Newcastle County Police Department. Very constructive dialogue of what we're doing. And I'd like to think that we're all on the same sheet of music here. Maybe some pages are a little bit different, but the book fundamentally is the same. I'm going to back up and say, yes, I have an excellent relationship with them, not adversarial at all. So it may be in other areas, but with me, they're great. Good question. Any other questions so far? Okay. Can we get back to all right. Sorry if I'm talking so much, but it's exciting, right? It's important endeavors that we're working on, and I voluntarily accepted this assignment too, so I'm excited about that. So they're all there. Forms are all there too. So when I designed the website, and please, again, give me some feedback on this, a couple of things in mind. I wanted to be able to be a resource for the public. For these questions that you're asking, and again, to go back of something after I leave here and say, wow, that was a lot of information coming from a fire hose, I want to go back and look. It's all there. Secondly, I want to design it for the chiefs that are asking about, well, what do I do about this, and what are the forms? The forms are all there. You can see them too, just like they can. Here they all are. And it kind of goes through what those are, so they can do it. And then the officers that are number one in our state and then calling from other states, what are the requirements on it? It's all here. At least I hope it is. So those are there too. So we go back up. Now let's go to training. Okay, so I talked about the training. 4 police academies in our state. We'll start at the City of Wilmington has a police academy. Newcastle County Police Department Academy. I know we have some graduates both, right? And then Delaware State Police Academy. And then the City of Dover is the most recent police academy. They're all here too with links to their academies if you're interested in looking at that. 3 of the academies are commuters, meaning they go in Monday and come back Friday, Monday and then come back at night. So Monday through Friday, day work and some extended hours, but they go in and they come home every night. Delaware State Police Academy is our residential academy, so they live there for the 22 to 26 weeks. All our academies we set a minimum threshold right now for the curriculum. We set the curriculum what's there as well. So the commission sets what that is. That is also something I'd like to explore a little bit more in depth when we can get to that. But we're looking at this and we're piecemealing it. But the curriculum, right now we're approximately, again, we're changing. We're in a real good state of flux. We're approximately about 615 hours minimum training, and it's broken down by different topics. Of that, all our academies significantly exceed that. 2 are in the 900s, right? So about 930 hours. So drastically exceed what that is for the minimum training. But this is the minimum. So academies and the agencies themselves, we also regulate and train and certify all of the law enforcement instructors. Everything from firearms instructors, general instructors, specific topic instructors, or master instructors. So we're responsible for that. And then with these come out. So those 4 academies, they all do a great job. One is not better than others. We all have our own partial, looking kind of my periphery with the officers in the room, of which academy may they prefer or not, based on their own personal experiences or their officers. They all do a great job overall, okay? And they all have to do this basic curriculum, but then they can exceed what those are. So you'll see what those are. The topics are all listed, the minimum amount of hours that are there, and so forth. In addition addition to this, there's mandated training that's required by the law, a different law that talks about this. So, for example, mandatory sexual assault for children investigations, and we ban chokeholds in our state, so there's topics about that. So it's specifically enumerated in the other code of what those other training is. So there's training that we require here from the post regs. There's training that's required in terms of what's in the law, and then we also have anything that happens thereafter. So once they go through this minimum training academy, most of the agencies will send their officers to a field training component. Sometimes it's a month or a few weeks, sometimes it's 3 months. Okay? So if you think about a perspective there, if a chief goes to hire an officer, the time they apply, let's say it's 3, 4, 6 months to get into academy, roughly 6-month academy, let's say 3 months field training. If you kind of put the math together, you're looking at just under a year, 9 months to a year approximately, before that officer is able to hit the street and work as an officer as an autonomous unit. Okay? So that's important, I think, to kind of think about that in terms of, okay, well, how can we hire? And then it's not just today. How could we have to think about forward thinking about what we're doing with those officers, and then all the training that comes with it. Initial training or reciprocal training, if they're coming from another state, they don't match those hours, they have to do the hours indigenous to Delaware. Same thing with a reactivation. Thereafter, once I'm already through the academy, I'm working, what do I need now? Minimum 16 hours of in-service training, in addition to firearms training, the chutes that we put in there, so from rifles to handguns to day shoots, night shoots, times in between, 60-day intervals, for example, between those shoots, day and night qualifying shoots. The qualifying score, all this, by the way, is here on the website for you to look at if you choose to. Okay? So we said that. I talked about law enforcement medical responders, CPR, AED, things that are required for other certifications. So the tools on their tool belt, think taser, capstun, handcuffing, a baton. All those things also require repetitive recertification in addition to that minimum 16 that I talked about. So they've got to go through all of those. Then, for the accreditation side, we also put requirements for accreditation on additional training, which they have to meet also. So think POST is a larger umbrella underneath that DPAC, but they also work in this symbiotic relationship. Because we have policies and procedures, but the training has to align with those, and sometimes the policy and procedure dictates a specific training. So, for example, the DPAC Commission, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we just passed brand new rule, brand new mandate that that all newly promoted supervisors have to complete a supervisor leadership development program. Once again, many of the agencies already did that or do that, but now we're requiring that to do that. So that goes back onto the training side. One other thing about the training is advanced training, so advanced or specialized training. So whatever the officer wants to go to another course to expand their knowledge, whether it be something specific in a topic, let's say fatal accident investigation and reconstruction, all right? Or maybe they go into, let's say, an aviation unit or a canine. Or they just want to say, I just want to go to a class to be a better interviewer, whatever that may be. We review those topics that are coming through to make sure that aligns as well. So just as the NDI that you asked about, ma'am, right, that's under the provisions what's called the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training, IADLIST, okay? So we're members of IADLIST. That's for NDI's house. There's also a certification program for training courses that go across the country. So things that are put on, for example, is the FBI, or what have you, right? So those courses have a blessing. They're automatically, because I know what the rigorous process is with that, they're automatically counted in here. But we had a case where the Dover training, the training academy director in the city of Dover, Police Academy, called and said, I have an officer that saw a flyer about this training that's being hosted, and I forget where it was. Is this good? Is this okay? And we reviewed it. And it turned out that person that was coming had never been vetted, and they were teaching things that we do not allow, such as chokeholds. So we banned that course, from being taught in our state. And we can't prohibit somebody from maybe going on their own if they wanted to even do that, but it wouldn't count for their training, and it certainly would not be aligned with policies and procedures where we train not to do those things. So we try to look at those things best we can. But it was kudos to the Dover officer in letting us even know about that so we could look into it. Okay, so that's the training that falls in. I talked about the 4 academies, so let's get over now to what you are here all about, the PAC. If you can click on that. So the Police Accountability Committees, part of the law which created POST and absorbed DPAC was that in there is that, in the composition of now what the DPAC Commission is all about, is that agencies are required to establish either singularly or in combination with another department or departments, police accountability committees, okay? The membership and composition, I handed you a document, which I think you already had. The chiefs gave it to you earlier on, perhaps before your first meeting. But either way, it's a reminder to you. That's a memo that I sent out to the League of Local Governments. I just did a presentation to them a few weeks ago and handed that back out to, again, as we work through that. And it kind of gives you an overview of what this is. And I'll start off by saying maybe what you're not. Right now, you're not a citizens review board. You're a police accountability committee. So what does that really mean? It means that, as I've talked about a few times, you play a critical role in partnering with the police departments, in your case, to be able to say, wow, what can I do better to help the police to do a better job of helping everyone else and us? So when that 911 call comes in, or that interaction with a police officer is, we hope that that is something that, okay, I'm enthusiastic, even though it may be the worst day in our lives, to have that officer show up. So what does that mean? The composition of the boards, we're encouraging, just like we do on the full board as part of the law, is that it should be a diverse group of people that are here. It has to maintain at least one member who has been negatively impacted, or a family member negatively impacted by the criminal justice system. Religious leaders, we hope to do. We've also asked for business owners, youth, so forth, to be able to come together. So 88%, as of today, 88% of the police departments in our state have established a PAC. 6 departments have still not done that yet, either individually or in conjunction with another. The largest one together, there's several of them. They're all listed here. If we can go, there's a tab. Yes, please. They're all here. You'll see it by county, and then if you kind of scroll down, please, great. You'll see all the departments. You can click on them. You'll see the members. You should be listed here, if we have it all correct. If you see something that's wrong, or you have any questions, by the way, later on, I'm fully accessible. Please call me, email me, and we'll fix whatever we need to do. We don't put your contact information there. That's up to the chiefs to maintain that, and certainly the board. However, I have been asked by an advocacy group, and I agree with this, that they said, what if we're a citizen and we want to contact a member of the police accountability and we don't have their contact? How do we do that? So what I've asked the chief, and I'm going to send out to ask the chiefs, kind of a heads up, is to perhaps, if you don't already have a website link or a kind of a generic mailbox. For example, we have a post at Delaware a mailbox that's general. There's a mechanism for any member who doesn't know you personally. How can they get a message to you if they don't feel comfortable necessarily going to the chiefs, but they know that we have a PAC, and I want to get that to you. So we're asking all the departments to do it. Several already do, and they're on here. You can see their links to do that. The largest group PAC we have, if you can scroll down, if I can pull it up, is right there, Sussex County. This is also a tongue twister. The Sussex County Southeast Regional Police Accountability Committee. Ocean View, South Bethany, Fenwick Island, Dewey Beach, Selbyville, and Dagsboro just joined. I think Frankfurt's getting ready to join as well. So they're there, up there. They're a great resource if you would like to look. They have a full website. A lot of things are there. If you haven't looked, I did provide the chiefs with that earlier on, but there's some things to kind of look at. They do a fabulous job, just as much as I've heard you did a great job on your initial meeting and getting together. So something to kind of think about. There's many other examples that are in there for you. Every PAC has said what we have here. If you'd like to come to our meetings, for the ones that have been around a little bit longer, you're welcome to do that, to go and attend, to reach out to them. Very, very wonderful environment to work with all these PACs packs doing that. So again, some are singular and some have a combination. So with your composition, what are you designed to do? There's a 20-hour requirement. And it says 20 hours of training that you have to complete within your first year. So what does that mean? Well, it is deliberately left open to provide autonomy because you may have something as a pack group that you would like to learn more about the police. So we didn't want to have it so specific that you couldn't get to what you wanted to do. This is a minimum threshold. We hope you exceed 20 hours. But what is the purpose first? Well, the purpose is if you're going to provide advice to the police department, the hope is that you learn more about the police officers and the department so that you have more of a contextual knowledge of what they do to provide a more educated response to what they are doing now, and then correspondingly build that relationship of, okay, we've seen you, we come to you, we're working with you, we're showing you things. And then conversely, the job of the officers and the chiefs are be able to say, what are we doing that maybe can improve? What are we doing that's working well? Please give us your feedback. What is something we don't know about, but you know about, but we just haven't been told that? So the design is that you form a real critical circle of sharing information and getting to closing those barriers to come together as a more communal environment to better policing and better service correspondingly from that. So recommendations for everything. We've had recommendations that have come out of PACs for policies that agencies had. We think you should change this policy, and they've done. I just got a recommendation the other Tuesday night, last week, or Thursday night, I can't remember, from one of the other PACs. It was actually one of the representatives on a state PAC, and it was a representative from Dewey Beach. And he is a business owner and said, what are you doing about seasonal police academies? And what is the department doing with seasonal police academies? Now, that really doesn't necessarily impact the PAC that he's from. He's with Delaware Alcohol, Tobacco Enforcement, Capitol Police, and the State Fire Marshal. So that there's no seasonals for them. But he asked a really important question that I'm taking back then to Dewey Beach and to look for us, because we have a criteria of what that training is for seasonal officers as well. Same thing with Chief Banks, particularly in Rehoboth down here, right? So it becomes a real critical question and discussion that we work through. That'll be brought up in a meeting to talk about later on. So I hope that the PAC is a conversation piece and advice piece that we can all learn from each other to do better, as I've talked about. Any questions about that? Okay, subject to FOIA, so your public meeting calendars, I think you already know that. You have the experts here in the room regarding that. So I'm not the expert in that. I am not an attorney, so I try to stay in my lane, but those things are there to kind of focus on. You should have minimum quarterly meetings. If you have more than that, great. What could you do to get those 20 hours? Well, I would encourage you to ride in the right front seat of that police car. Get in that cruiser and see what they do. And talk to those officers, see what they're experiencing. Roll call, shift briefings of some sort. Look at the vehicles and the equipment. Look at the equipment that's in the departments. Talk to the chief. Look at their policies and procedures. There's a variety of different things you could do. Maybe go to a firearms range if that's an option and see that if you're interested in something like that. I highly suggest this as well. So just down the road in the western side of the county, Chief Kraft from Seaford has offered his use of force simulator or response to resistance simulator. Highly recommend, if you have the opportunity, to go there. Either you're packed individually or maybe you partner up with another one and go there. It's free. He's offered it up to all the chiefs. Put yourself in a scenario where you can de-escalate a situation of somebody that may be under the influence of something, somebody suffering from perhaps a mental health crisis, somebody just angry at the world, or some situation that hey, I'm lost, I need help. How would you interact with that? Go through it, see what you would do without training, and then what training might you think the police officer should do to do a better job with that? Or you might be presented with a situation where you have to respond in a fraction of a second to somebody pointing a gun at you. And then you, correspondingly, what do you do? So it's kind of like the fight, flight, or freeze. What would you do in those circumstances? It really gives you an experiential problem-based learning approach to think about. So I highly encourage you that. But those are left to the chiefs to work through, to track your hours and so forth, and they just report back to us at the end of the year on what those things are, and certainly we provide a resource for you. So What I like to tell the chiefs, they've heard me say it a lot of times, is that I'm not here to step on anybody's toes. I'm here to walk beside them and guide them and help them the best that we can do. Okay, any other questions about that? All right. Sorry, before you get the hook on me. The last side of the house is DPAC, so if you clear that. So what's the accreditation all about? So if you think about post being hiring standards, training standards, and accountability for behaviors that rise to that level we talked about, on the accreditation side, it's sound policies and procedures, evidence-based policies that come into place. So another real-life example, very contemporaneous. We require on the post side minimum of 16 hours of active shooter training, minimum. Okay, just for basic, and there's reoccurring training thereafter. Question that came from you, ma'am, asking about kind of talking with others. So part of that summit, we came back and we'd all talked about, as a post directors across the country, what are we looking at for those hours? Should that be increased, particularly after Uvalde, Texas? Okay. So we just passed it, the commission just passed it, approved, minimum now 24 hours of basic active shooter training. It's sad in this world that we have to do this, but we do, right? For that, followed by mandatory 4 hours refresher training minimum every other year, minimum. Most of the academies, if not all, I'm pretty sure they all are providing this training now anyway. But we wanted to make sure that it is required for them to do that. The second iteration that we just added in there, for example, ties in to the accreditation standard, but also now the new training standard, because we incorporated now just not police officers responding, regardless of the color of the uniform or what the patch says. But what if I'm a paramedic? What if I'm another first responder and I've got somebody who's been injured and they need treatment immediately, but yet the police are focusing on the immediacy of the threat? Who's taking care of them? So, but yet you don't want a chaotic event, as chaotic as that is anyway. So we're working in training through multiple modalities and departments to try to accomplish that. So this incorporates what's called a rescue task force model or integrated task force or integrated response model into that. So with this, with the accreditation, we are required, part of the law also, same law, requires that every single police agency in the state is accredited by 2028. And I've said 2028 is going to be here pretty quick. So with that being said, we have 11 agencies that are nationally accredited in our state from the Commission of Law Enforcement, from the Commission of Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, which is on the right as you're looking at the screen. If you can kind of scroll down a little bit, great. They're all listed there, okay? Those agencies, we call it a bridge. There are some things specific to Delaware accreditation that is indigenous to Delaware standards. So those national accredited agencies, just after we call them a crossover or a crosswalk, they cross over, they do that. All those 11 agencies are accredited. As I mentioned earlier, when we started with accreditation, it was a voluntary process. Now it's mandated. So we're doing what I affectionately call the accreditation highway of managing traffic onto the lane of getting every agency accredited rather than have a pile up at the end of 2028. So to that end, these agencies are doing a fabulous job. In fact, you've got an accreditation assessor and great chiefs here working on it. And Lewes just went through their first accreditation not long ago. And I'm very proud of all the work that they're doing for this endeavor. So right now, I have 4 agencies this afternoon at 1 o'clock will be presenting before the full commission, the DPAC commission. And those members are similar. It's not the 17, it's 12-member commission board. Very similar, some are different. But we have 4 agencies that we're able to just get through, and they'll be moving forward today. And that is Fenwick Island, South Bethany, Wyoming, and we just finished an on-site accreditation site visit in Camden on Friday. Well, what does that mean? We're changing this too, so bear with me if I'm off by a number, but approximately 110 standards that every agency needs to meet. Within that are numerous substandards. They very well know what I'm talking about there, and they have to look back. We look at a 3-year cycle. What are your policies and procedures for all these things that covered those standards? The manual is there for you to look at. It's all up online. And what they might do, you must have a policy, for example, on separation of juveniles and adult prisoners, for example. Number 1, it's the law. Number 2, that's what we require as a standard. What do you have for separating, for example, let's say guns that have been turned in, let's say it's a domestic violence case, or let's say evidentiary guns versus your department-issued firearms. We don't want them intermixed. We want to have a chain of custody, we want control of that evidence, and so forth. So we set a vast array of what requirements are. Physically, for the building and the structure, what they must have for the police department, from locks and securities to video camera surveillance and, for example, evidence, checking for the evidence, temporary evidence that I'm an officer, I collect, let's just say, drugs, and I put it into an evidence container. Once I seal it up, I can't get back in there, and nobody else can either. So the integrity of the evidence process and the accountability is there until a full-time evidence custodian has special permissions, and they are able to retrieve that and maybe process that, fingerprints, whatever, right? So as it goes through. So we set the parameters for that, and it goes through everything from their entire department. It's a very arduous process. It's very tedious. I've been told by some chiefs it's painful at times to go through, because it's literally matching up. Show us something. We just don't take your word for it that you have the policy. Now provide us some type of demonstrable proof that you actually follow the policy and that you train your officers to that policy. So they have to provide us proofs of what those are. Right? So usually it's crime reports or video surveillance or something from the courts or training documents, all those things that go in, and they have to show that for every single standard and substandard. Then we assign a team of mock assessors, 3 outside assessors that are either nationally trained or we train them for Delaware standards. They look at all those files and those procedures. They review those, and then what I call affectionately, they send their homework back to the departments to fix what they don't have or what they need to do or what they need to add and so forth. They do that. Then when those mock assessors are comfortable, then we schedule a full on-site, which is the final exam, so to speak. So we just had that Camden on Friday, for example, was the most recent one we did. I go to those as well, and I'm looking at it as a complete fresh look. And we do a full review of everything that they have, from their equipment to their cars, ride-alongs, their facilities, their policies, their procedures, everything. Used to be pen and paper. We just went, not too long ago, to what's called Power DMS. It's an electronic database system, which is much, much better and bringing us to the 22nd or 25th century, I like to think, as we keep moving forward. But so for that. Now, what does that really mean? We want to standardize and make more professional the agencies and what they do. The Delaware Chiefs Association has, I think, 13, maybe 15, or somewhere in that vicinity, of model policies, too. And then agencies that really have done an exemplary job, we have their catalog of their policies to share with agencies, from small 1-2-person departments all the way up to our largest agencies with the state police with 725, 735 troopers. So all within that we do, and we're able to, every single chief has shared their policy and said if any agency can benefit from these policies and we can be further aligned for that, they've done it. So we'll work with those agencies to accomplish that as well. So that catalog is fully there. So let me give you an example, because this is a big question I get. Well, what about a small department? How do I do this? I don't even have the resources. I might have just 2 officers. Well, Felton, just up the road in Kent County, Chief Guile came to us and he said, tell me what I need to do. Just tell me what I need to do. He's a 4-person department. He has a 3/4 by 3/4 square mile jurisdiction. His police department is in the front, kind of the apex, so to speak, of a building that is also serves as a town hall, which used to be a former rest home. Side note, they actually shared with me that, believe it or not, I don't know, but there is a living ghost that is there. It's a resident that apparently passed away sometime in the early 1900s. They tell me it's a friendly ghost. It supposedly has been featured on Netflix Paranormal. I don't know that. I don't get any royalties. But they say this. I never experienced that we were there. But I just tell you that sometimes the agencies, they have to work with the cards that are played to them. And so we went in, and one of the first questions I said to him, getting back to an earlier point, I said to the chief, he had a bench there with some handcuffs as a secure prisoner. I said, Chief, what happens if you have a juvenile and an adult here? What do you do? He's so small, he doesn't have another area for a separate bench if he had 2 prisoners like that. So what do we do about that? And his answer was, I have an MOU with Harrington Police Department to bring that other person there. So it's a 2-part question. Some have been told me that's a trick question. It's not a trick question. It's the law. Secondly, again, it's part of our standards, and do you know it? So, and do they know the separation of what that they have to be separated for that? They have the MOU, and likewise, the MOU is reversed from Harrington with them. And their second backup is with Delaware State Police Troop 3. So they have those contingency plans in place for those situations. Next, we go upstairs. Temporary, I talked to you about evidence being separated from others. He didn't have any of that prior to that. He had some, I shouldn't say that. He had some, but not what were needed to meet the standard. He had locks, he had things that were there that were great. And then for the temporary, but when we went to the permanent evidence locker to look at what was going on there, it goes in from a lock in the door, but as we go through, there's a window there. And I said, they said, what do you think? I said, what about your window? And it's not just me. There's 3 new assessors that are coming from different parts of the state here with us, and my accreditation, my post-accreditation administrator, John Feehan. So we're there, and they said, we're on the 2nd floor. It's all locked. And I said, yeah, and I'm short, and I carry a lot of ladders. So I put a ladder up, and I go in through your window, and now I'm your evidence. He says, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. I said, or forget the ladder. I have a rock. I throw the rock through the window, and now I throw a smoke bomb through there. Now I've tainted all your evidence as well. And I got a question from somebody else that said, well, what are the chances of that? The probability is probably small. But what's the probability of somebody allegedly shooting and killing a CEO in New York City and then being captured in Altoona, Pennsylvania, similar size jurisdiction? Could that happen? And the answer is yes. And even if it did, do we want to make sure things are correct? So I gave him his homework. We said, you have 2 weeks to get this done. Within 6 days, window was gone, barricaded up, sealed. Okay? Similar to that, stop sticks. Stop sticks are a device that are thrown out. This is something to me. By the way, today counts towards your 20 hours. Okay? So, because, I mean, this is what it is, right? So he had the spike strips, which you put out to deploy in the event of a pursuit to stop a vehicle. There's parameters, there's training highly on that. For example, you don't want to put it out for a motorcycle, okay? Very dangerous situation, very valuable tool, but there's a lot of things to train on, and the policy needs to be there. And we said to him, one of the assessors said to him, show us where your training is on that. And he had gone to some training and thought that this was good. It didn't meet where we needed for the standard. To his credit, he immediately pulled those out of the cars, told his officers, you're not to use these. He says, what do I do? Small collaboration Delaware. I called up to Captain Reinbold at the time, State Police Academy training director. I said, Kerry, please tell me that you're still doing emergency vehicle operations training. He says, we are. I said, in service. I said, are you doing stop sticks training? You're performing that part? He goes, yes, sir, we are. I said, can you give me 4 seats? He says, when are they coming? And over the next 2 days, those 4 officers were able to go there free of charge, get the appropriate training, back into the car, and they're good to go. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get all these agencies aligned with better and so forth. But full candor, like, I'm here to learn. We're here to learn. My team is here to learn. That's why you're so valuable. Again, I know I'm going back to this, but it's important, and I believe in it. So accreditation right now, if these 4 agencies are approved today, they're recommended for approval. If they do go through today by the full commission and they're voted in, we'll be at 50, I think it's 54.8% of all agencies accredited in our state. We still have a long way to go to be able to do that. So we're working on that. I have 1 full-time employee dedicated to accreditation. I say that to say we're doing the best that we can, but by the same token, I thank you to the chiefs, because those assessors that I talked to you about, 3 mock assessors, 3 full-time, 3 final exam assessors on sites, they're coming from the agencies, the chiefs, lending them to us as adjuncts to be able to go out and assist us do that accreditation. Before it, during the mock, and looking at all those things ahead of time, and then actually when we get there. So my thanks are to the chiefs, not only the 2 in the room here today, but also to the others across the state, because we couldn't do it without them. And we can't do it without you. So that's a long summary. Sorry if I went too long on that, but I certainly will hear any questions that you have. Should you have any other questions that you want to ask later, or when I leave here and you say, oh, I should have asked this question, my contact information is all there. The chiefs have my contact information. As I said earlier, I'm here because I want to be here, not because I have to be here, and here to help any way that I possibly can. And I will hopefully find the resources to answer your questions better than what I did, if I missed anything. Do you have any questions at all?
One here, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for a very comprehensive overview. As it relates to the 20 hours, my colleagues and I, as we gather those hours, are they reportable to a certain place? And would it be the respective chief? Okay.
It is. It's to your chiefs. They'll keep a running total of that. Part of an annual report that they need to submit to us, which all encompassing of all the other things. But they will be, that's part of will be the new requirement for that annual report, that they submit their PAC, your PAC membership, and if you have a change. So some PAC members have been going on for a while, and they've changed members. Some members just lost interest, so they just couldn't do it because of work or home commitments, or what have you. So that's their records would obviously reflect somebody new coming in, and that clock for them starts when they come in, not when the commission started or your accountability committee started. Great questions. So yeah, you'll be tracking all that, please, and the chiefs will then get it back to us later on. And the chiefs know if you see something, I'd like to really learn about this, and you need help, I'm a resource to help them find those other avenues too, if I can. Okay?
Great, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, sir, appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming. We
Thank you so much
truly
again
appreciate it.
for all that you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you. Next on our agenda, we have our Lewes City Solicitor, Alex Burns. Help us learn a little bit about FOIA.
Dan, do you need 5 for bathroom?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a good, anybody? Okay, 5-minute break?
That's just a terrible idea.
As the news anchor.
Hey, if we could get ourselves reorganized here.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay, we're back on the record here with our next presenter, the town solicitor. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the time. And my name is Alex Burns, city solicitor for Lewes, with the law firm Behrman Dallas. Sorry, that was a former name. Now it's Brockstead, Federico, and Dallas. They keep changing it. But anyway, so I just want to help keep you guys on track here, and I have a short presentation, maybe about 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, to try to help out the commission. And I've tried to tailor FOIA specifically to this group because there's a lot of information and I don't want to overwhelm you with relevant details. So starting with what FOIA is. So all 50 states have some form of a sunshine law, and Delaware's law is codified and has two basic purposes. It has open meetings and open records. So that's a framework to examine how this all works. Next slide, please. So this is a quote right from FOIA, right from the state code. And I just wanted to highlight this because I think it's important for the framework to look through this whole topic. Quote, "It is vital in a democratic society that public business be performed in an open and public manner so that our citizens shall have the opportunity to observe the performance of public officials and to monitor the decisions that are made by such officials in formulating and executing public policy. And further, it is vital that citizens have easy access to public records in order that the society remain free and democratic. Towards these ends, and to further the accountability of government to the citizens of this state, this chapter is adopted and shall be construed." So, when in doubt, make it public. That's kind of the framework that the AG's office looks through all these things. So next slide, please. So the definition of a public body is very broad. It's almost anything that's an entity of the state or a municipality. So sometimes, like in the case of this group, it's relatively easy. So if you go to the next slide, the state code says that police accountability committees or boards are subject to FOIA. So that makes it much easier. But if you go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight a recent opinion on ACT, the Association of Coastal Towns, for the purpose of showing that, excuse me, showing that if this body was to create a subcommittee, that would be a public body as well. So if you ever want to look at a specific issue, such as a topic that's relevant to this group, any subcommittee of this group would be a public body, because ACT was deemed to be a public body because it was established by a group of municipalities. Each of those municipalities paid funds towards ACT. So even if a municipality does not create a body that provides funds towards a subcommittee, that could be something such as just an investigation. That's enough to be a public body. So next slide, please. So this goes to what I was saying previously, that even an ad hoc committee with only the power to recommend is subject to FOIA. So the key really is if there's a quorum of members present. If there's a quorum of members present, there's a meeting of a public body. So in this case, a quorum would be a majority of those entitled to vote. So I believe, are there 6 members right now?
Currently, yes.
So 4 of the 6, if you're together, that's a quorum that could vote. So next slide.
Alex,
Yeah.
sorry, Chairman.
No, Alex, just a quick question on that. And it doesn't have to be a formal gathering, is that correct?
That's right.
So if the four of us got together for lunch and we were talking about the business of this committee, then that becomes subject to the public meeting requirement.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was going to get into that in my next slide.
Oh, I'm
So-
sorry.
No, you're fine, completely fine. So it's an informal gathering, it's still a public meeting. So if this group wanted to get together on the boardwalk, it's still a public meeting, so long as there's a quorum and you're discussing public business.
And does that also include, I'm assuming it would also include electronic communications?
Correct. Right, so that
So
would
we
be...
could be we don't have to be physically together, but if we're electronically communicating with each other and there's four or more, that becomes a public meeting subject to FOIA.
Right. The AG's office would refer to that as a serial meeting. It could be a form of circumventing the public process by communicating and making decisions over email. It's a violation of FOIA sometimes in that you could be doing that publicly, and the public doesn't have an opportunity to observe.
Alex, quick question. How does that relate to training? We're required by this body, you heard from Post, 20 hours a year.
Yeah.
So if we're hosting training, because some of us as a group think if it's scenarios-based, de-escalation, or just talking about our individual departments and tours, how's that work? Because the body could be together, we're not discussing business, except we are doing training.
Right, so it depends first whether there's a quorum. If you're doing training in less than a quorum, then the public meeting requirements would not apply. But if there's a quorum there, on the safe side, the safe path would be to presume that it is a public meeting, and you have to allow the opportunity for the public to be there. The reason for that is because the purpose of a meeting is broadly construed, in that the definition of public business is very wide. So anything that affects the group or is in line with the mission of what the group is trying to accomplish, it falls within the definition of public business. So for example, the hour requirements would be public business. So if there's a quorum there and you're conducting the hour requirements, that would be a public meeting.
Thank
So you
you.
recommend that we limit that to 3
Yeah,
of this space at any one moment?
exactly. That'd be a good way to handle that. So I just wanted to point out that for purposes of FOIA, you can still live your life. There are several opinions about the fact that you can gather in a quorum and it's not a public meeting. So for example, a recent case involved a school board. A school board was a public body. A quorum of the school board went to a function at an elementary school. There was a complaint about that. That is not a public meeting because you can still do activities. You can still go to holiday parties. You can still go to events. You can go to, as a group to a restaurant, for example. It's really the trigger is you have to have a quorum and public business.
I think the training exception could be carved out there if, I don't know, they went to a use of force simulator, all 6 of them didn't, and went through that training, but not specifically talked about business of the community, of the committee.
So if the training was in the context of a separate group, for example, a quorum of this body could go to a conference, and if you got hours for that activity for some requirement, if there's some sort of third-party group putting on the training, that would be helpful. Yeah. So I've said most of this already. I just wanted to point out that third bullet point, that public meetings must be held within the jurisdiction in question. So usually that's an easy question to answer. If it's a City of Lewes committee, you have to hold the public meeting within the City of Lewes. Here we have 2 municipalities, so the safest way to proceed would be to hold meetings within either municipality. So as long as you're meeting at City Hall, you're fine. but just holding a meeting in Sussex County could be questionable. So just stick with the easy answers on this one.
And Alex, I'm sorry, just on that point, that if we have call it a home base, I forget how the phrase the statute
An anchor
uses.
location.
You
Yep.
have that location, the statute, that you can have participants who, like Andrew today, who's remote. So if the fourth person is remote, that still makes it a public meeting, even though you only have 3 in the home location.
Correct. So you can have a virtual meeting such that everyone is online, as long as there's still an anchor location where members of the public can come and participate, offer public comment. This has been sped up by FOIA and Zoom, so there's an opportunity to have online meetings much more frequently. Yeah. And I guess I should also add that someone participating remotely still has all of the rights of someone in person. So if you're remote, you can still vote. You can still make a motion. It's just like being there in person.
Thank you.
So yeah, just another caution of serial meetings. The town of Georgetown was dinged a few years ago for having serial meetings whereby the city council was polling each other via email. So I think the best practice there would be just try not to reply all. If possible, just reply to one person, and then you're not having group conversations. So I just put this slide in here because this is interesting, that public comment seems to be a deeply ingrained topic in public meetings, but the requirement is relatively new. In 2022, public bodies were required in Delaware to accept public comment at every meeting. Before then, many public bodies allowed public comment, but they didn't need to. So every single meeting must include its opportunity for public comment. You can place reasonable time, place, manner restrictions on that public comment. For example, where on the agenda you want to have public comment. It could be at the beginning, could be at the end of the agenda. You could set a uniform time limit, perhaps 3 minutes per person. And generally, you let people talk about whatever they want. If it's disrupting the proceedings, they don't have a right to do that. But if they want to talk about golden retrievers, they can do that.
And if a member of the public is using their time to address the committee,
Yeah.
and they come with exhibits, photographs or a letter, whatever it may be, and they offer those exhibits for the committee's consideration, do those documents then become subject to FOIA as well?
Yep, they become public records at that point because they would be in the custody of the public body.
Would it be prudent, or is it required, or at least prudent, to warn members of the public?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. They might.
To warn them of the possibility that if they want to utilize an exhibit of some kind to make a point about whatever issue they're hoping to address, does it become almost like an exhibit in court where if they present it to the committee's consideration, it becomes the committee's?
Exactly. So for example, this PowerPoint is a public document now because I've presented it here and given it to Blue. So I think, to the extent you want to warn people before they do that, it would be helpful because the citizen might not realize that they're giving up some authority over that document. And public comment in general, I would suggest that you don't need to and probably should not engage with public comment. So there's a requirement that the members of the public have an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes, but it's not a two-way street. You don't have to engage with them. If you do choose to engage with them, you should be uniform and not just favor some members of the public. But I guess for purposes of FOIA, the concern would be that you could go down a rabbit hole off the agenda, and a member of the public could create a whole new discussion that's not on the agenda at all, and that could create a FOIA violation. So it's better just to give people the opportunity to be heard, and you can thank them for their comment.
Appreciate that.
Excuse me. So just to follow up on that one, so if a member of the public raises an issue or comment, and there is some expectation of a reply and answer, a solution to it,
Yeah.
how does the group determine, we'll get back to you in, what's the
Yeah.
process for getting
So
back?
there's no set process for that. I know it could be kind of awkward if someone is demanding a response or expecting a response. You could ask staff to look into the issue. You could consider the topic to be placed on the agenda at a future meeting. That being said, a member of the public does not have a right to control what goes on the agenda. But there's no set right or wrong answer for that. It's really up to the chair whether they want to consider that moving forward.
Just in consideration for transparency and communications and good relationship with the community, people,
Yes.
will be hoping to get some feedback to what they voiced.
Yeah, and you can certainly do that. You could task staff to look into the issue, and there's nothing preventing you in FOIA from communicating further with that member of the public.
That will be done through Dan or any other mechanism?
It
So
could-
it could be formal
Yeah.
on the record.
There's no set mechanism for how that's done. You could address that in your bylaws for how members of the public engage with the commission moving forward, but there's no requirement to go beyond these FOIA restrictions that require the public body to allow a member to speak. The member isn't entitled to further discourse. But it could be a best practice if you want to engage and support members of the community. You could talk with them further, but you don't have to.
And Alex, if it's brought up as public comment, but it's not on the agenda, it's not something that you really can talk about.
Right, you don't want to get into that,
You're
exactly.
going to have the FOIA violation because it's not on the agenda. So the public wasn't duly notified that this would be a topic of discussion. So it's better, I believe so, that
Yep.
it's better to push it off, not because you're not trying to address the issue, but you're not going to violate FOIA by saying, we'll look into that and we'll look at putting it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Well said, exactly right. You don't want to get into topics that are not on the agenda. Yeah. Okay, so we spoke about virtual meetings already. I guess one last thing I'll touch on with the virtual meetings is that as long as there is a in-person component, the virtual meeting component is going above and beyond. Lewes does a great job of allowing for remote participation, but it's not required under FOIA. If for some reason there is a technical difficulty and the internet cuts out, that's not a FOIA violation. As long as you have at least some aspect of the meeting in person, you're covered for FOIA. Okay. So in general, notice for all public meetings needs to be published 7 days in advance. In certain circumstances, you can have a meeting with less than 7 days notice, but I don't think this body will run into that because it's narrowly construed what you're allowed to have a meeting with under 7 days notice can be. For example, an emergency meeting could be taking place without 7 days of notice, or if there's a grant application that needs to be filed right away, you can meet with under 7 days of notice, but generally, 7+ days, I don't think that'll be a problem for this group to comply with. So the meeting agenda needs to include a general statement of the major issues expected to be addressed. And agendas may be changed. You can always delete something from an agenda. That's never a FOIA issue. If you get to a meeting and, for example, you want to cut off one of the PowerPoints, you can just move on to the next topic. It's not a issue to delete something. It becomes an issue if you're adding something to the agenda. So if you're adding something to an agenda, that becomes a bit more tricky. You have to put an asterisk on the bottom of the agenda stating why you could not give 7 days notice of this topic. So if there's no good reason for that, you'll have to wait till the next meeting to hear that topic. This is a quote I like from a Delaware state case. So FOIA requires a general statement on the agenda for each item to be addressed, but if you can be more specific, that's better. For example, if you know that someone might be appointed to this group, including their name on the agenda, municipalities have violated FOIA for saying consideration to appoint someone to a board when the municipality knows who that person is. So whenever you can be more specific, it's always better to be more specific. It just helps members of the public understand what's going on, and it helps the body avoid a FOIA violation.
On that point, Alec, one of the issues that's on our agenda today, not sure if we'll have the time to get to it, is to begin discussion and consideration of applicants for membership to join the board, to your observation just a minute ago. There's an exemption in FOIA, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, for consideration of individuals. I think the statute refers to jobs, more of an employment
personnel
thing.
exception.
The personnel exception. Would that apply, and if I understand it correctly, if the personnel exception applies, the commission is entitled to go into executive session?
That's correct. So
Would an applicant for a position on this board qualify for that exemption, should we feel as a group the necessity of doing that?
So typically that exception is not used for that purpose, but I'm aware of at least one opinion where the AG's office said that's okay to do that. In a case several years ago involving a municipality in Sussex County, the city council used that same exception to go into executive session to consider potential applicants for a Board of Adjustment seat. And the AG's office said that was appropriate. So in theory, yes, but I think it's rarely used. And if it's possible to do it publicly without revealing sensitive information, I guess you need to weigh the harm of doing it publicly versus privately. If it's possible to do it publicly, it's always easier.
Your advice is to err on the side, to generally err on the side of going public.
Unless you need to talk about subjects that are in, there's some sort of confidentiality or something that someone would not want to be public about their circumstances and their application. But in general, err on the side of public. If there's no harm, if you just want to talk through subjects that are benign, then do it publicly, yeah.
Could you set up a subcommittee composed of three voting members or less for purposes of establishing the way you want to handle applications, and for that subcommittee to review applications and to come back to the full committee in public session with recommendations for those.
You could do that. I guess the one wrinkle there is that the subcommittee would be deemed to be a public body and would need to meet publicly to investigate those topics.
Even if it's 3 members or less?
If it's one member, then they can. But if it's more than one member, they have to do it publicly.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
How does that differ with the quorum rule of 4
Right.
or 6?
Right, so within the definition of a public body, there's a test for whether something is a public body. So if it's a subcommittee of a public body created, if it's something created by a public body. So for example, going back to the Association of Coastal Towns, municipalities in Delaware created that group. So if it's a group that's being created by an existing public body, and then the second part of the test is whether the new group is supported by public funds, which in this case, probably not. There probably would be no public funds involved with reviewing applications. But the second part is it's supported by public funds or charged with making recommendations or investigations. So to the extent you would want a subcommittee to report back, then that prong would be satisfied as well, and that group would have to be public as well. Yeah, so subcommittees generally have to be public as well.
Alex,
Yes.
the previous slide referenced executive session, and then I think one of the questions just did. Can you talk a little bit about what might be acceptable to be discussed in executive session and how that would come about?
Sure, absolutely. So, you're on slide. Could you go down a little bit, Blue, to we're just on notice. Go down to slide 18. So just before I get to executive sessions, I wanted to touch on meeting minutes. So FOIA does require this public body and all public bodies to maintain minutes of its proceedings. The legal requirements for those minutes are minimal. You need to talk about who was present, the votes taken, and what the next steps are, what's the action agreed upon. There's no legal requirement to have a detailed legislative history of the topics discussed. And I think, that might slow down the meeting minute preparation process to detail all of the different conversations. So there's a requirement to maintain minutes, and to the extent you can speed that process up by simply complying with the minimal legal requirements, that would be beneficial. There's no statutory language or provision for how long you have to prepare minutes, but the AG's office has said that not preparing minutes 3 years after a meeting is a FOIA violation. So you should try to within a couple meetings. Yeah, this is just a quote saying.
Can I ask a question? I'm not sure if Andrew got his question answered, so I don't want to be just jumping in. But with that, each town, Rehoboth and Lewes, have their minutes, say recorded. Back to the training. Say I had a session that currently the members we have are 6, and all 6 were going to go, and I put it out, and it could, quite honestly, nothing to hide. It's talking about the department, a tour that I offer to the general public anyway. So if I did a 7-day advance said that, so they could come in. If the chairman was there, he opened up the meeting and said, we're then going to do our training, which is a tour and all that. Would we have to have that I guess the question is, does that training have to be recorded in the minutes, or as long as we do minutes and I just go ahead and type it up afterwards for the next meeting to approve that we went, the chairman was here, was present, we went into the training.
Right, it could
did the
be one
training
sentence.
And all that.
Yeah.
So we don't have the obligation, it has to be recorded, because some of the meetings are recorded.
That's right. There's no obligation to record the video. The minutes do not have to detail the training line by line. It could just be one sentence, the committee engaged in training. And that would satisfy FOIA. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this is just a quote speaking to what I just mentioned about minutes. So this is from a Court of Chancery case saying that, quote, "There is no clearly implied statutory requirement to summarize the subjects discussed with any degree of specificity in the minutes that FOIA requires to be prepared and maintained." So just another way of saying that the minute requirements are minimal. And don't let them slow you down. So now I have a couple slides about executive session, and I hope this will answer the question from the gentleman online. Feel free to chime in if I do not address it, but executive sessions are supposed to be few and far between. The exceptions permitting executive sessions are narrowly construed. In other words, most meetings are public. There's very few grounds for having closed-door meetings. And so some of the most common exceptions are in the next slide. Discussion of an individual's qualifications to hold a job or pursue a training, or a employment disciplinary case, or dismissal case, unless that employee wants the proceedings to be done publicly. They have that right. This slide will not really pertain to this group. If we go to the next slide, just wanted to point out another common ground for executive sessions are discussions of pending or threats of litigation. So that example shows that it's not enough to discuss a potential grounds for legal risk. There has to be a concrete threat of litigation to even go into executive session, such as a demand letter or a statement that someone's going to pursue litigation. You can't just go into executive session to talk about something that could be improved in the law or steps that could be taken to minimize legal exposure. And there have been several cases about that. So for example, rumored potential litigation is not a proper basis for going into executive session. General legal advice is not a proper basis for going into executive session. Reference to intense public interest or public So in other words, you can't go into executive session to talk to your lawyer. So this just speaks to the idea that the litigation exception might be acceptable if there's a demand letter or existing litigation or ongoing similar litigation. But in general, be very careful about using that exception unless there's either an ongoing lawsuit or something seems very likely. So just speaking about executive sessions generally, there must be a vote in public to go into executive session. The purpose of executive session should be included on the agenda. You don't have to detail exactly why executive session is being held. For example, In the cases of executive session, you can reference the personnel exception. You don't have to say it's because of a certain employee's name. You don't have to be detailed, unlike general agenda items where you want to be as detailed as possible. For executive session, you do not have to be as detailed. Okay. And so speaking about public records, so public records are information of any kind, owned, made, used, retained, received, produced, composed, drafted, or otherwise compiled or collected by any public body relating in any way to public business. So in other words, it's a very broad definition of what is a public record. There are very few exceptions. So just assume that anything written will end up in the newspaper or on a website. That's the safest course there. In the context of law enforcement, a common exception to the public record requirements is that records of pending investigations or criminal intelligence files are not included in the definition of a public record and can be withheld. 25-IB38 is a very recent case, just affirming the idea that the investigatory file exception is upheld for police reports, even police reports involving activity before there is any investigation. You don't have to bring charges to use this exception. And interestingly, this is a Court of Chancery case that the AG office cited in 25-IB38. So the investigatory files exception attaches as soon as a public body is made aware of a potential issue, and the exception survives after the investigation is completed. So just because a case is closed does not mean you have to hand those records over. There could be cases in other jurisdictions. There could be an ongoing matter. But at the same time, these records exceptions do not prevent a public body from releasing records. If it feels that the case is truly closed, it can release records if it wants to, but it doesn't have to.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Just to tap on that one. Two things. Does the public has any right to record what goes in a public meeting?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Number two, do we record what's going on in a meeting?
Yeah, I think this is being live streamed. And will be recorded on YouTube.
But it's not required.
It's not required, right. Mm-hmm.
So in terms, again, of transparency and make sure that the community is informed and it feels that there is a good relationship, since these records are recorded and they're public, it's a matter of that they could request, if they're not satisfied with how something was handled, that they could request the recording. And
they could request the recordings. Generally, any emails you send each other about these meetings, they could request those items. The request is generally made to the FOIA coordinator. In the case of Lewes, Ashley is the FOIA coordinator. In Rehoboth, it's Ann. And generally, the FOIA coordinator has 15 days to respond to a record request. So if someone asked for the agenda and recording of this meeting, they would have to receive it within 15 days unless there was a mutual extension between the public body and the requestor, the requestee. And in general, they will receive that information, and if they do not receive that information, the public body has the burden of citing a specific reason they cannot provide that material, such as 10,002-03, because there's a pending investigation. So this group likely will not have ongoing investigations. So you probably will not need that record exception.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Our executive meetings also falls within the same procedure.
Yep, executive sessions are required to have minutes. Those minutes can be withheld so long as the purpose still remains valid for keeping the material private. So for example, if you're considering potential applicants, you can keep those minutes private while you're still considering those potential applicants. But once someone is selected and there's no reason that information needs to be private anymore, then those minutes would need to be made public. Yep.
Alex, question with regard to public records. I mean, given the fact that we're all private citizens and the computers we're using are our own, we don't have government-issued computers for purposes of carrying out our position here. And just piggybacking what Sean Moriarty was speaking about with regard to, as one particular instance, if a member of the community wants to reach out to the committee and wants for some reason not to communicate directly with the chiefs and not go through a government channel, that is just being one example, but even individual emails that we send amongst ourselves are public records subject to disclosure.
To the extent they involve public business.
Correct.
So the comment period was not included on the agenda. Then you have two potential issues there where you have to require public comment, allow for public comment at all meetings, but you can only do what's on the agenda. In that case, I would still allow public comment, even if it's not on the agenda, because it's the lesser of two evils, because FOIA is construed in a way that promotes public access. So a technical violation of doing something that's not on the agenda for the purposes of promoting engagement with the public would be the way to go there. But generally, just include public comment as a placeholder on every agenda. Yep. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you very, very much. I mean, it's certainly an education that I needed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Following up on Alex's last point, it's with the permission of the committee, open up the room to public comment. Is there anyone who has something that they would like to bring up or address the committee?
Well, as long as you're asking.
Just introduce yourself to the committee, Bill, if you would.
Bill Shull from the Cape Gazette.
Oh, Bill.
Hi. I just had a question. I asked Sean a couple of questions, but he was deferring more to the chiefs for the answer. So, well, one thing I'll ask is, and Chief Spelt brought it up last night at council, is the recent incident with the truck that was on our beach here with the weapons, and how did your department, Chief Banks, help Lewes, and how did you guys work together for a case like that where there was an active search for a suspect? I mean, you know.
Yeah, Bill, I don't know if that's appropriate to comment here. We can certainly talk after the meeting, the two chiefs with you. I think that would be a better way to facilitate that. Do you agree, Dan?
Okay. And the other question I had was, given the situation nationally, are you finding that there's less trust in police? Is the national situation trickling down to local departments?
Great question. I think what I can say in Rehoboth Beach is we're not seeing that the case. We have a lot of events in Rehoboth Beach. Homeowner associations, a lot of their board meetings meet in the fall. I've been to like 5 or 6 of those recently. We have Faith and Blue event and some just last weekend. But I meet with the Chamber of Commerce in Main Street, different religious groups and training, just open dialogue. I think, so for us in Rehoboth Beach, I'm not seeing it. Anybody has a question can always give me a phone call or email, and we'll certainly get back to them and have them over, or I'll go to their home. So I haven't seen that, but yes, it is concerning nationally, but locally, I haven't run into any issues.
Yeah, Bill, I'd just say, I echo Keith's comments. Sussex County and Lewes and Rehoboth in particular are pretty fortunate that the support of policing remains high, always has. I think I'd make the comment that nationally that's pendulum is swinging back as it normally does over time.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's almost good afternoon. My name's Kathleen Baralt, and I just recently moved to Lewes, but I have 22 years in law enforcement and most recently served in the town council in Chesapeake Beach on the other side of the bridge, where there is also life. But I just wanted to say that the topics this morning, first of all, my applause to you for creating the Police Accountability Committee. As I said, I served in Prince George's County, and at times it's critical that the public and the community have access and transparency to the actions of police officers, not only because they have questions, but also, too, in support of the officers. It's like the introduction of the video cameras into the cars. They also protect the officers as well as let the public understand. So I think it's critical, and I think this forum is an excellent opportunity for the public. And my only other comment is in regards to the open meetings, to the FOIA information. When I served on the town council, it was very difficult and challenging for the members of the council themselves to, let's say they're bringing up a topic, and it's so easy to email one another or text one another, but it really is, it's critical that you avoid that at all, especially when you have a quorum, because I know in my jurisdiction, they could easily obtain those records, and then you look like you're not being transparent. And it's hard to do, because if you're going to talk about, I don't know, ice cream at the next meeting and you all have great ideas, it really, it's hard not to conduct that business via the text or email. But other than that, I just want to say thank you for the work that you do and for the creation of this committee.
Thank you very much.
Do you mind if I ask you a question? Can I? Out of curiosity, how did you hear about this gathering today?
Actually, as I said, I was interested in serving in Lewes, so I reached out and I saw that that Chief Spell and Chief Banks had created the police accountability, and I was interested to offer my services from my experience and perspective. So I put in an application, and the chief reached out to me and said, we're having this meeting, so that's what brought me here.
I'm glad you did.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I think that concludes the business on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn for? Oh, Chief, something else?
Does he have to waive discussion item number 3 under new business? Or
That's what I was going to ask you, Mr. Chairman, maybe because of the time, if you guys could just poll your membership, if maybe discussion number 3 be taken up at another time, would be and get to that.
Well, I'm willing to stay if I don't.
That's up to you. You can.
Well, in terms of this process, I think that Alex answered a couple of my questions with regard to the appropriateness or not of executive session as a process. So that's been answered, at least to my satisfaction, in that regard.
I think what we're getting from Ashley in the back, who is our FOIA coordinator, is if you're not going to discuss that item, that you need to poll membership or your board.
Let's take a minute and discuss.
Also
it.
want to be cognizant of the time for the respective chiefs and the other folks from the city. If they have other commitments that are pending, that would obviously sway my vote one way or another.
I know that I have to depart. I have a meeting that I'm supposed to be at.
Okay. So as long as Mr. Glassman would remain, that would provide us with 4 for the quorum.
But I think I also need to be asked to be excused too. I'm so sorry, you know.
Okay. So do we have a motion to postpone this item to our next scheduled meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Aye.
Am I second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay.
With that being said, Mr. Chairman, if I could recommend, we meet quarterly right now, that I would recommend we have another set of, try to coordinate another meeting sooner rather than later, obviously meeting FOIA, to get this on the agenda, because we do have a couple applications, and so I think it's important to discuss your process that you want to do to move forward, and so we can get that information to them. But it's also came to my attention that another police department has asked to join our PAC, the Delaware River and Bay Authority. And at that same meeting, I would suggest maybe putting that on the agenda for a representative from that department to come and speak on why they would like to join this PAC. And you don't have to obviously take any action at that point. You could and say by yes or no, and to do that. And so I guess the recommendation is a meeting sooner rather than later with at least those 2 items on the agenda.
Sounds prudent to me. Everyone?
You asking for a motion?
Yep. Motion?
Well, not really a motion. I'll work with the chair, if that's okay, to set up a date and the agenda.
You do have an open motion. Motion and a second to postpone. It looks like item 3, E3, and F would be reports of committees. So that would be what the remainder of the agenda is. You already covered public comment, so would be E3 and F. You have a motion to postpone that until the next meeting. So just, I would say, call for the motion.
I'll second that motion. All.
Do we need a vote?
If you made a motion, just to clear the motion.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Got it.
Aye.
No, just close it. So
This concludes our meeting?
Yeah.
Do we have to decide right now when that next one is? No. Okay. All right.
Very well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.